Sonal Shah is the White House Director of the Office of Social Innovation and Civic Participation. And before that, she has an illustrious career both in the public and private sector. Immediately before that, she was head of global development initiatives for Google.org, something I hope we talk about today. Jessica, as many of you probably know because you see her on CNN all the time as I do, is the CNN national political correspondent based here in DC, who reports on politics, policy, and culture for an array of programs, including CNN's The Situation Room. That's actually, I told her this would not be like The Situation Room. I'm no Wolf Blitzer. As well as John King USA. As well as John King USA. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for taking the time.
Pleasure to be here.
We're coming up tomorrow, as you know, is the first anniversary of the Serve America Act. A lot of good things have come of it. I'm wondering if both of you could comment on what you have seen come of it and where you think we are with it.
For you first.
You know, it's an exciting year, and it's been an exciting year. Starting with kind of just the announcement in the beginning of the year, last year, when the president put the Serve America Act as the one act he asked to get done during the joint session of Congress. And then 5 weeks later, having a bill that was signed, sealed and delivered. And it not only sparked the imagination of the country, but also sparked the imagination of multiple groups out there. Last year, we had the launch of United We Serve, the Serve America Act implementation, 15,000 more volunteers because of the Recovery Act, the $200 million that the corporation got. So there's a lot of things happening at the same time. But I think more importantly, what was best and what was amazing is the number of groups that came to the table to talk about service that hadn't come to the table before. So we can, as a service community, we can talk about the service community coming to the table, and that, you know, those are, I'd say, the group that's kept the bill alive, that got the bill signed. But we had faith-based groups come to the table. We had small and large nonprofits and communities come to the table. Businesses came to the table, and the ways that they implemented the implementation of the spirit of the Serve America Act was incredible. And so the success is more that it's just the beginning. We've got a long way to go in terms of the implementation, going from 75 to 250, growing an organization, really thinking about how service can have an impact, but more importantly, the imagination and the sparking of the imagination that it's created has been probably one of the bigger parts of the more fun parts of the job too.
One thing I'd add from the political perspective is this is one of the only major bipartisan pieces of legislation that I
you had to bring that up, did you?
But why that's probably relevant to everyone here is that despite what you hear about Washington and the acrimony here, there is a great desire on both sides to find issues that are in some non-controversial way easy to come together on. And this is a natural. And the more that members of Congress are presented with opportunities to do good in non-controversial ways, they can find consensus, the happier they are. And so there's a synergy there. The other point I'd make about this is it's clearly a program that emphasizes you can measure the outcomes. And that's been a theme I've seen since I've been covering Washington, that as government is giving money to these organizations, they want ways to measure what is being done. And the more an organization can provide that kind of thing, the more likely you are, it seems, to get funding.
Let's pick up on that just for a minute. So you and I were talking about this before we came up, this notion of metrics, of evaluation, of sort of gauging. You used the word transparency when we were talking. Some people have said that some of the accountability measures that have been taken, not necessarily by this administration, but in general, the move toward them, has actually distorted innovation. And others, and so what I'm curious about is what kinds of measurements do you think seed innovation? And Jessica, I'm wondering if you could talk about what it's like to report on these kinds of metrics as well.
So I think we should separate a little bit metrics and evaluation from innovation. I think both are needed, and both sides of the coin are needed too, to be fair. But on innovation, it's innovation in ideas, it's innovation in processes, it's innovation in doing things slightly differently. But at the end, we all still need to get to a goal, which is, are we achieving the impact that we said we set out to achieve? And we have to measure ourselves to something. To do innovation for the sake of innovation is great. I mean, fine. So I can design a better jacket, but if nobody wears it, what's the point? And no matter how great the jacket is, you've got to be able to wear it. So similarly, when we think about innovation in the service sector and when we think about innovation in the nonprofit sector, it's thinking about what are the innovations that are needed to achieve greater impact, to solve problems. And hopefully come back years later and say, because we did this, it solved a problem. Yet making the transparency of the metrics and evaluation more important is important, because getting out there what works and what doesn't work is actually fairly important, so others don't make the same mistakes if we want to replicate, if we want to scale, if we want to do those things. But sometimes I think we're afraid to be transparent about that, because, and to be fair, the funding streams are hard, because funders are like, well, you failed, therefore we don't want to give you money. But we need to build a conversation in the same way that we do in the business sector, where failure doesn't lead to no innovation. Failure leads to building on innovation.
Right, so one quick follow-up on that. I think for a lot of folks in this room, I suspect that there might be some concern that goes something like this. The metrics that people are asking me to use do not reflect reality and how things actually change. And so I'm curious, when you think about this, is there a principle in mind or something that helps organize your thinking about it?
I tend to start with what's the problem we're trying to solve, and then starting with the metrics from there. I think sometimes we get to metrics because we don't start with the what is the problem that we're trying to solve. But I also think, and I know Michelle and others have been a part of this conversation, is you need to come to the table with what metrics you do want measured, because it will be a one-way conversation if everybody wants to hold their metrics to themselves and like, well, we'll just do whatever you want us to do, versus here's what we think needs to be done. And that conversation, I think there's an openness to having that conversation of, well, what do you think the metrics should be? And then let's have a conversation on whether we can live with that or we can't. But we've got to start somewhere.
Right. Jessica, I'm curious, as you cover these kinds of stories about accountability, particularly now in this political environment, I'm just curious how you think about those kinds of stories.
Well, first, we all come as reporters to these issues with, a bit of a skeptical eye, and we know that it's very easy. What tends to happen is when the budget comes out, each side will say, we've eliminated the budget on this because it wasn't performing. And one side will seize on it and say they're being cruel, and the other side will seize on it and say, look, we're being efficient and we're spending taxpayer money wisely. And what we look for is a narrative. And that's the one thing that I think I have in common with everyone in this room, is if you can tell your story in a way that maybe it doesn't check the boxes that are on some form the government sent you, but it's a compelling story and you can get it out there, that seems to be what's persuasive to the media and what keeps you alive. And so what I look for is, I'll start calling these, when I've had to do budget stories, I'll call groups and say, tell me about you, what do you do? And if I can't get a good narrative, I move on, tell me about you, what do you do? And I move on until I get a story that connects. And that's what gets it out there.
Right. Great. Okay, I'm going to ask another question, and then I'm going to open it up to the room. So start thinking about a question or two that you'd like to ask. Jessica, you were mentioning about that the Serve America Act was passed with bipartisan support at a different time in our political, this arc of politics.